The energy inside the studio shifted the moment Johnny Depp took his seat on the Today With Jenna Friends set, a subtle tension settling beneath the bright smiles and warm introductions. What began as a friendly exchange about creativity and personal growth slowly transformed as the questions edged closer to controversy, carrying a tone that felt less curious and more confrontational. Depp remained composed, but his posture hinted at unease, as if he sensed the conversation was drifting somewhere uncomfortable. As the interview unfolded, that discussion lingered on past public battles rather than present work. Depp answered carefully, choosing his words with visible restraint, yet the repetition of certain themes seemed to wear on him. The audience noticed the shift, the laughter thinning, the pauses growing longer. What was meant to be light daytime television began to feel heavier, as unresolved tension filled the space between questions and answers. One remark in particular appeared to strike deeper than the rest, framed as casual commentary but carrying an implication that challenged Depp's narrative. He paused, exhaled slowly, and offered a measured response that clarified his position without hostility. Still, the moment left a mark, changing the rhythm of the conversation and signaling that boundaries were being tested live on air. Jenna attempted to redirect the discussion, but the tone had already shifted. Depp leaned forward, explaining that public curiosity often blurs into judgment, especially when stories are repeatedly revisited without context. His voice remained calm, yet the firmness in his delivery suggested long-held frustration finally surfacing, not as anger, but as exhaustion. The exchange grew increasingly tense as follow-up questions revisited sensitive ground. Depp's expression tightened slightly, his patience thinning with each repetition. He emphasized the importance of moving forward, of allowing individuals to redefine themselves beyond past conflicts. The studio felt unusually quiet, the audience sensing that this was no longer a routine celebrity interview. When another pointed comment surfaced, Depp stopped, visibly weighing whether to continue. He spoke about respect, about the difference between accountability and perpetual punishment, and about how media narratives can trap people in moments they are trying to leave behind. His words carried weight, drawing a line that had rarely been acknowledged so openly on daytime television. The hosts appeared momentarily unsettled, unsure whether to press on or pivot. Depp's calm intensity disrupted the usual flow of polite banter. Rather than escalating his tone, he slowed it, forcing the conversation to confront its own direction. The discomfort in the room was palpable, yet oddly grounding. As the tension lingered, Depp clarified that his presence on the show was meant to discuss art, healing, and growth, not to relitigate old wounds. He expressed appreciation for audiences who allow space for evolution, while gently pushing back against questions that felt rooted in past assumptions rather than present reality. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. The audience shifted in their seats, aware they were witnessing something unscripted. Depp's restraint made the moment more powerful, highlighting how controlled frustration can speak louder than raised voices. The polished veneer of daytime television cracked, revealing something raw beneath. A brief attempt to lighten the mood followed, but it landed awkwardly. Depp smiled politely, though it did not reach his eyes. The disconnect between tone and substance became impossible to ignore. The interview had reached a point where continuing as planned felt disingenuous. Depp then spoke candidly about boundaries, explaining that revisiting trauma for entertainment serves no one. His words were not accusatory, but instructive, as if inviting reflection rather than conflict. The studio fell silent, allowing the weight of his statement to settle. When another question circled back to controversy, Depp finally drew a clear line. He stated calmly that he was unwilling to continue the conversation in that direction. There was no outburst, no dramatic gesture, just a firm declaration that his limits had been reached. The moment stretched longer than expected, an unscripted pause that felt almost confrontational in its stillness. Depp nodded politely, thanked the hosts for their time, and began to rise from his seat. The audience gasped softly, sensing the significance of what was unfolding. As he stood, Depp reiterated his respect for the platform but emphasized the need for conversations rooted in fairness and growth. His departure was not rushed, but deliberate, signaling intention rather than impulse. Cameras followed as he stepped away, the studio momentarily frozen. The hosts attempted to respond, their words trailing off as Depp exited the set. The usual rhythm of daytime television faltered, replaced by an uncertain quiet. What was meant to be a controlled segment had become an unpredictable moment of assertion. Viewers later described the walk-off not as dramatic, but as dignified. Depp did not storm out in anger. He withdrew with composure, leaving behind a statement stronger than any confrontation. The absence of spectacle made the moment resonate even more deeply. Social media quickly seized on the clip, labeling it everything from defiance to disrespect. Yet many viewers saw something else entirely, a person choosing self-respect over compliance. The debate ignited instantly, reflecting broader conversations about media ethics and personal boundaries. Commentators noted how Depp's response contrasted sharply with typical celebrity confrontations. There were no raised voices, no insults, no theatrics. Instead, there was clarity, restraint, and a refusal to participate in a narrative he felt was no longer fair. Fans praised the decision, pointing out how rarely public figures are allowed to exit uncomfortable situations without backlash. Depp's choice challenged the norm, suggesting that walking away can sometimes be more powerful than staying silent or playing along. Critics argued that public figures should expect tough questions, but supporters countered that repetition without purpose crosses into provocation. The incident reopened discussions about where journalism ends and entertainment-driven pressure begins. Behind the scenes, producers reportedly scrambled to regain control of the broadcast. The unscripted nature of the moment disrupted the usual flow, reminding viewers that live television still carries unpredictability, despite careful planning. Depp later declined to escalate the situation publicly, allowing the moment to speak for itself. His silence afterward reinforced the impression that the walk-off was not about drama, but about principle. Media analysts revisited the footage, noting the subtle cues leading up to the departure. The pauses, the shifts in posture, the measured responses all pointed to a decision that had been forming gradually, not impulsively. The incident became a reference point in conversations about celebrity interviews. It highlighted the importance of consent, context, and respect, especially when discussing deeply personal histories on public platforms. For many viewers, the moment felt relatable. The desire to leave a conversation that no longer feels safe or productive resonated beyond celebrity culture, touching on universal experiences of boundary setting. The show moved on in subsequent episodes, but the clip continued circulating. Its staying power lay in its subtlety, proving that not all impactful moments need volume or spectacle to leave an impression. Depp's departure reframed the narrative around confrontation. Rather than escalating conflict, he chose disengagement, asserting that participation is a choice, not an obligation, even under bright studio lights. The conversation shifted from what was asked to why it was asked. Audiences began questioning the expectations placed on public figures to endlessly revisit their past for consumption. Over time, the walk-off was remembered less as controversy and more as a recalibration. Depp did not reject dialogue, he rejected repetition without purpose. That distinction reshaped how the moment was understood. In the end, the interview became a reminder that even carefully curated spaces can be interrupted by authenticity. Johnny Depp's decision to leave was not about walking away from questions, but about walking toward self-respect, leaving behind a moment that lingered far longer than the segment itself. As the clip continued circulating online, viewers began to rewatch the interview with fresh perspective, noticing the subtle build-up that led to Depp's decision. What initially appeared sudden now felt inevitable, a slow accumulation of moments where the conversation repeatedly brushed against boundaries that had already been signaled. The quiet nature of his exit made those earlier cues impossible to ignore. Discussions across social platforms shifted from shock to analysis, with many pointing out how the interview reflected a broader pattern in celebrity media. Depp's walk-off was increasingly framed as a response not to one question, but to a culture that often prioritizes provocation over progress. His restraint became central to the narrative. Media commentators highlighted how rare it is for a guest to reclaim control without confrontation. Depp did not demand the floor or attempt to dominate the exchange. Instead, He exercised the simplest form of agency, choosing to disengage. That choice challenged the assumption that visibility requires compliance. Within fan communities, the moment sparked conversations about emotional labor. Many noted how frequently public figures are expected to revisit painful chapters for the sake of audience engagement. Depp's refusal resonated as an act of self-preservation rather than defiance. The show's hosts faced mixed reactions, with some viewers sympathizing and others questioning the interview's direction. The moment became less about assigning blame and more about examining the structure of celebrity interviews themselves. It exposed how easily conversations can drift from curiosity into repetition without intention. Depp's silence after the incident only deepened the impact. By choosing not to clarify or justify his actions publicly, he allowed the moment to stand on its own. That absence of commentary prevented the narrative from escalating, reinforcing the impression that the walk-off was measured rather than reactive. Analysts revisiting the footage noted how Depp's bodied language communicated as much as his words. The prolonged pauses, the careful phrasing, the steady tone all suggested someone weighing options in real time. His eventual departure felt less like a break and more like a conclusion. The incident also prompted renewed discussion about live television and its limitations. While spontaneity can create memorable moments, it also demands heightened awareness and sensitivity. Depp's exit underscored how quickly an interview can shift when that balance falters. Viewers who initially expected a dramatic confrontation found themselves reflecting instead on restraint. The lack of spectacle forced attention onto the substance of what had been said and unsaid. Depp's calm approach denied the moment easy sensationalism. Over time, the narrative evolved from confrontation to commentary. The walk-off became a symbol of boundary setting in public spaces, reminding audiences that participation is voluntary, even under contractual or cultural pressure. Younger audiences, in particular, connected with the moment. In an era increasingly focused on mental well-being and personal agency, Depp's decision aligned with values that prioritize self-respect over endurance. The resonance extended beyond celebrity culture. Industry professionals quietly acknowledged the lesson embedded in the exchange. Interviews, they noted, must adapt to changing expectations around consent and context. Depp's response served as a reminder that meaningful dialogue requires mutual trust. As weeks passed, the clip resurfaced periodically, often reframed with added nuance. What once seemed abrupt came to be understood as deliberate. Context softened judgment, allowing the moment to settle into cultural memory with greater balance. Depp's career has been marked by reinvention, and this moment reflected that same instinct. Rather than allowing a single narrative to define him, he chose to step away from it entirely. The decision aligned with a broader pattern of reclaiming authorship over his public story. Ultimately, the lasting impression was not the walk-off itself, but what it represented. Johnny Depp did not leave in anger or silence, but with clarity. In doing so, he transformed an uncomfortable exchange into a lasting statement about dignity, choice, and the power of knowing when to step away. As public discussion deepened, many viewers began questioning why Depp's calm departure felt more disruptive than a loud argument would have. The answer, some suggested, lay in expectation. Television often conditions audiences to anticipate conflict expressed through volume, not restraint. Depp's choice unsettled that expectation, replacing spectacle with silence, which lingered far longer in memory. Commentators observed that the interview exposed a subtle imbalance inherent in celebrity conversations. While hosts guide the narrative, guests are often expected to follow along, regardless of comfort. Depp's decision challenged that structure, reminding viewers that consent does not end when cameras start rolling. The absence of immediate clarification from the show added to the intrigue. Without a definitive explanation, the moment invited interpretation rather than closure. This ambiguity kept the conversation alive, encouraging viewers to engage thoughtfully rather than reacting to a packaged takeaway. Fans revisiting the clip noticed how Depp repeatedly attempted to redirect the discussion before leaving. Those efforts reframed the walk-off as a final option rather than a first response. His patience, visible in hindsight, reshaped the narrative around intent. Industry veterans quietly acknowledged how moments like these serve as inflection points. They force producers and hosts to reassess approach, tone, and framing. Depp's departure became a reminder that interviews are collaborative, not extractive experiences. The moment also resonated with individuals outside the entertainment world. Many shared personal stories of choosing to exit conversations that no longer felt respectful. Depp's action validated those choices, illustrating that walking away can be an act of strength rather than avoidance. Analysts pointed out that Depp never attempted to control the narrative afterward. By resisting the urge to explain himself publicly, he avoided escalating the situation. That restraint allowed the moment to mature organically, evolving through reflection rather than reaction. As time passed, the walk-off became less controversial and more instructive. Media schools and communication workshops referenced it as an example of non-confrontational boundary setting. Depp's composure turned a fleeting television moment into a lasting lesson. The exchange also highlighted how audiences themselves are changing. Viewers increasingly recognize nuance and intention, valuing authenticity over dramatics. Depp's response aligned with this shift, earning respect even among those who initially disagreed. Some critics argued that daytime television thrives on difficult conversations. Supporters countered that difficulty should not come at the cost of dignity. This debate kept the moment relevant, anchoring it in broader cultural discussions about respect and responsibility. Depp's long career added context to the incident. Having navigated decades of public scrutiny, he appeared keenly aware of how narratives form and persist. His decision to disengage reflected experience rather than impulse. The interview's legacy gradually shifted from confrontation to clarity. What remained was not the tension itself, but the example it set. Depp demonstrated that asserting limits does not require hostility, only self-awareness. Viewers who initially tuned in for entertainment found themselves reflecting instead on communication dynamics. The moment encouraged audiences to listen more closely, not just to what is said, but to how and why it is asked. Over time, the clip became a reference point whenever conversations about celebrity interviews resurfaced. Its endurance stemmed from its quiet defiance of expectation, proving that meaningful moments do not always announce themselves loudly. In the end, Johnny Depp's departure was remembered not as an escape, but as a statement. Without raising his voice or casting blame, he reclaimed agency in a space designed to limit it. That choice transformed an uncomfortable exchange into a lasting reminder of the power of restraint. As weeks went by, the moment began to surface in broader discussions about modern media ethics. Viewers questioned whether interviews had become less about conversation and more about confrontation disguised as curiosity. Depp's calm refusal to continue served as a quiet critique of that shift, prompting reflection rather than outrage. The walk-off also highlighted how silence can be misinterpreted. Some initially viewed Depp's lack of follow-up as avoidance, but others recognized it as intentional restraint. By not fueling speculation, he allowed the moment to settle naturally, resisting the cycle of reaction that often amplifies conflict. Observers noted that the discomfort viewers felt mirrored the discomfort Depp experienced on set. That shared unease created empathy, drawing audiences closer to the reality of being placed under a spotlight that rarely dims. The interview became a rare instance where power dynamics were briefly reversed. Over time, reactions became less polarized. Even critics acknowledged that Depp's exit was not impulsive, but measured. The clarity with which he set his boundary challenged assumptions about what professionalism looks like under pressure. Media professionals began revisiting interview training methods, emphasizing listening over persistence. Depp's departure illustrated how easily a conversation can unravel when curiosity lacks sensitivity. The moment became an informal benchmark for what not to overlook. Fans continued to defend the decision, pointing out how often celebrities are expected to sacrifice comfort for content. Depp's refusal to do so resonated as an act of self-respect, reinforcing the idea that boundaries apply regardless of status. The absence of confrontation made the moment harder to dismiss. Without raised voices or visible anger, the focus shifted entirely to the substance of the exchange. Depp's composure forced viewers to engage with the underlying issue rather than the spectacle. Some viewers admitted the interview changed how they watch talk shows altogether. They became more aware of leading questions and repeated framing. Depp's response sharpened that awareness, encouraging more critical viewing habits. The incident also reinforced how authenticity disrupts formula. Daytime television thrives on predictability, yet Depp's unscripted exit broke that rhythm. In doing so, it reminded audiences that real moments cannot always be neatly contained. As the clip continued to resurface, it was increasingly framed as a lesson in self-advocacy. Depp demonstrated that one can assert limits without hostility, choosing dignity over endurance in spaces designed to test patience. Conversations shifted from what Depp avoided to what he protected. Viewers recognized that his departure was less about refusing questions and more about preserving agency. That reframing softened criticism and deepened understanding. The moment also resonated with creatives who often feel pressured to explain themselves endlessly. Depp's actions suggested that art and identity do not require constant justification. Silence, at times, can speak just as clearly. Over time, the interview became less about the single show and more about evolving expectations. Audiences increasingly demand respect-driven dialogue, and Depp's response aligned with that cultural movement. The lasting takeaway was subtle but powerful. By choosing when to disengage, Depp modeled a form of strength rarely celebrated on television. His calm departure challenged the assumption that visibility must always come at a personal cost. In the broader narrative of public life, the walk-off settled into memory not as controversy, but as clarity. Johnny Depp did not leave to escape discomfort, he left to define his terms. That choice ensured the moment endured not as drama, but as a statement of self-respect.